And then we come on to the sword next door. So there's certainly a couple more. He certainly gets given a sword by the King of Two Scillies. He gets given a sword probably by the Sultan of Turkey. There's one sword that is thought to be it. It's a little bit more debatable than the sort of auctioneer's blurb would have you believe. Because whether Davison, when he was given it in 1805 from the estate, he was definitely bequeathed a sword. Whether that was actually the sword is a bit more debatable, or whether Hamilton kept on hold of it and gave him something else. Arguable, because it's not really in keeping with the other items that are listed with it. But anyway, that sword that went to Davison in 1805 as part of Nelson's will came out to auction a couple of years ago. It got separated from its scabbard and thing. So we know Nelson gave away swords. We know Nelson was given swords by various people, and particularly in the Mediterranean. And the Mediterranean thing was quite a giving of swords. And actually, if you get between the Habsburgs and the Ottomans, part of their peace treaty each year is that you have to give a sword to the other side. So it's very much in their culture and in their keeping. As I say, Scillies, Turkey did it. So we come to this sword, given to Murray, or certainly ended up with by Murray, given by the Dey of Algiers. This is the lovely sword that's next door. Absolutely in keeping for the period, so very, very credible that it is a sword from the Dey of Algiers, highly ornate, highly valuable. So absolutely no doubt at all. Given in 1798, according to the letter. I'm going to get corrected if I get this wrong in a minute, I hope. So 1798 is given the letter, and there's a letter given the thing, and it's given for the Nile. Slight problem. Murray wasn't at the Nile. Murray was the captain of the fleet for Nelson. So it's quite possible that this sword was given for Murray to give to Nelson. That would seem the most probable explanation. Now, two possibilities. Either Murray went, thanks very much, I'm having that. Or, which is actually probably, I would argue, more credible, he probably told Nelson, I've just been given this sword for you. And Nelson went, cheers mate, hang on to it. You're a good bloke, you have it. Because that's in keeping with what Nelson did. He got so many swords, he kept on giving them away. And I think that's the more likely of the two. But we can't prove it.
That's our assumption as well.
Yes. And that's where I would go as a historian. Okay? So you can see this one, and you can see the oval side ring, which I would argue is the type Nelson probably fought with, and that one's Captain Moss's, and it's absolutely of its period. It's a really nice example next door. Okay? That's me talked for nearly my hour, giving you sort of 5 minutes to ask questions. I don't have to dash off that quickly, so you can ask more. You can look at things on the table, and I just ask you to be careful with your fingers on the blades. Not for sharpness, I just don't want too much grease on them. There's nothing that sharp. Please, over to you for any questions.
Are there any questions?
During the course of your talk, you mentioned the fish blade.
Fish blade.
Yeah. Is that for purpose of durability or the balance that you were seeking earlier?
It was done to have a back cut, I think.
Okay.
So it's what I call a fish blade. So you've got the sort of the fish's spine down the middle and the flatness either side of it.
Right.
That's why it's called a fish blade. It's actually really ineffective. Used in sort of the India campaigns and things like that. Although you can get the backslash, you can cut both ways. Other naval swords are all one cutting blade only. This gives you an end that cuts both ways. But actually it makes the blade much more fragile. So it breaks. We go through a series of sword scandals, a bit later than this, so these weren't caught up in the sword scandals. But the 1870s, 1880s, we got so industrialised that we are marketing out our sword production to this is for bayonets, cutlasses and swords, to a big British company that's got so big, but it said to the Royal Navy and the Army, that's alright, we can do our own quality assessment. Because we're so big and so perfect and so wonderful that we can do our own quality assessment. So we'll assure our own swords and we'll make sure they're all the right standard for you. Oh, and then we're so big we can't get enough labour, so we'll import some cheap labour and sort of do some subcontractors. And then the swords kept breaking.
That was Wilkinson, was it?
No, but in Africa. So Admiral Wilson VC broke his sword at the Battle of El Tir, on the enemy, and ends up getting his VC because he's attacking him with the end of the wrong end of the sword because the tip isn't there. And that broken sword's in the Portsmouth Museum, Naval Museum. So there's a whole series of scandals, and you could take those paper headlines and transpose them to the 2010, related to Afghanistan and Iraq, and you could get the same headlines. It's quite interesting.
Can I go on from there? And we're talking about the cutlass. I thought that possibly you'd need a slashing blade, a curved blade, or was it more a defensive boarding party?
It's a pure. It's
offensive.
It's offensive.
Yeah.
We don't do defensive in the 1800s.
Right.
We assume we're going to win.
Right.
They're held in generally barrels in the middle of a ship because it's your gun crews. So you get boarders away, and it's the boarders come from the crews on the other side.
Right.
It's basically, depending on the ship, 2 or whatever from each gun party, and they'd grab the weapons and go. But you've got no real overhead. Very noticeable our sword drill for different from the army. No overhead because you're going to get caught.
No room.
But a lot of it's just going to be pure press of weight. It's just hacking and hacking and hacking. So it's that precise. There's no finesse in it. And cutlass drill is taught to be done with both hands. So you do your practice, and then you swap hands and do the other arm. Presumably, so if either you get tired or you lose an arm, hey, you carry on.
What about Wilkinson's sword? Forgive me. I've got a sword at home, and I've actually got the original receipt from Wilkinson's for a colonel. And that would be fairly common, wouldn't it? You can go to Wilkinson now, can't you, and get a sword receipt from 200 years ago.
You can go to Swords, who owned all the archive for Wilkinson, and get the original thing, yes. Yeah, so you can still look up who... You can't always get who owned it, or who bought it, because sometimes you'll get the tailor that bought it, who then sold it.
Right.
So sometimes you'll get the
like
middleman.
Geese and Hawks.
So, going back that period, it's generally Hawks.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you'll get the whatever, or Geeves, you'll get the relevant one, and you'll get the, we bought this sword, and then you need their archives to get to it. And of course, Geeves and Hawks archives were burned in World War II.
It's very interesting. We still get swords these days, and it's still used as a way of marking something. So, for instance, in the garden industry where I used to work, the best in show got a sword, a Wilkinson sword, and so it was actually seen as a mark of quality and obviously doing well. So,
and that's why Robert Pooley bought Wilkinson sword stuff, because Robert Pooley bought swords each year from them. He was an aviation engineer and did an invention of his company. And he used to give swords for various pilot things. And when Wilkinson stopped making swords, he was like, "What do I have a sword for?" "I'll buy the company."
Earl Howe's, or blackjack, in the late 18th century, that was a jewelled sword, I believe.
Yes.
Do you have illustration of that, or?
I think I might have, actually.
Because it's, I believe it's usually loaned to the National Maritime Museum, or has been from time to time.
I've got a very small picture of it being presented. That's the picture of it being presented. I don't own the original, so I can put it up on my presentation.
Need to get my glasses out.
Just an interesting thing on the Murray sword, because as Mark said, there's still quite a few questions to be answered on it. But the interesting thing is that, as you know, that on the way back from being presented the sword, there was the wreck of the Colossus. And it seems very strange that many things were lost on the Colossus, but the sword came through. And so we were thinking that perhaps the sword may have got back to London in a different route, and we're still looking into some of the letters going back and forth. But so far, the only mention we have is the one that you found in the Times.
But there is mention of the fact that because the wreck didn't go down immediately, so they did get on board and got stuff off the wreck in that first bit.
Yes, that's right.
So I would have thought, because that's fairly light and it's valuable, it's one of the first things you take.
Interesting though, they didn't take the logbook, which we would have thought perhaps would have might been the thing. Maybe that had a few things in they didn't really want to reveal. But yes, you're right. I mean, and certainly if I was going, I think that would be tucked under my arm, whereas if I was leaving the ship fairly rapidly. Okay. Any more questions? Or Well, can I say thank you so much, Mark? I mean, I've learned so much today about swords and ceremonial swords and a lot of questions I think about, you know, what happens to these swords and the provenance on them, it being so important, isn't it? Because, as you say, a sword could start off life and then be changed. And I'm very much like you, because I used to do a little bit of fencing, and you actually got a weapon that suited you at the end, you know. So you say, well, I went to FA because that was much more for me, and
You've got patience then.
yeah, I got patience. Yes. It takes long to kill anybody with that.
Sharpening the pencil.
So yeah, so very much that, and you can see how a person got a sword, and then over a period of time would have actually probably had it modified, changed the handle. So very difficult sometimes to know exactly what they're. The good thing is that we actually know that the sword next door, Captain Moss's sword, is the actual sword, because he was killed at Copenhagen, and all the things that he had with him was returned to the family, and they've been kept there, and they've got a very strong provenance. So we know the telescope, we know that the things, and the other wonderful little one, and you'll see some reproduction, is the little book that he had, which was the signals. And when he was dying, we know this from a very good account, but he was on the poop deck with a megaphone and his signals book in his hand, giving out the signal. So he didn't have his sword in his hand either at that stage, giving out that, and then he was shot by a sniper from the fort. And in fact, I've seen the original of the signals, and there are some rather red marks on it, which suggests that that was probably true from what was happening there. So those are absolutely genuine. We know that from there. So don't worry about provenance on those. But we wait on the Murray sword. I think one of these days might be a second book, Barry, on this.